How to learn grammar. After school, I always head over to the cafe where my job training is about to begin. It's kind of exciting but nerve-wracking too. Honestly, I have no idea what to expect from this new experience. I mean, I've never even worked in a cafe before, so I'm wondering, can I really pull this off? Will I be good enough? When I finally arrive, my first impression is pure surprise. The cafe is much more modern than I imagined, with all sorts of people bustling around, sipping coffee, tea, and snacking on these tempting chocolate cakes and sandwiches. And then I meet my boss. She's only 25 years old. But here's the thing. She's already been running the place for over 2 years. 2 years. She seems to know every little detail, from how to brew the perfect cup of coffee to keeping everything spotless. And she's great at dealing with customers, always with a smile. She wastes no time showing me the ropes. How to make the coffee, clean up afterward, and interact with the customers, which honestly seems like the toughest part. But there's something about the way she does it all that makes me feel like maybe, just maybe, I can handle this too. The journey was just beginning though, and this first day was only a small piece of what was yet to come. Everything felt new to me, almost too new. I could barely keep up with everything she was saying. Honestly, I think I only remembered about 20% of it if I'm being generous. But the good thing was, she wasn't just talking at me the whole time. She actually let me jump right in and try things out for myself. Of course, I made mistakes, probably more than a few. But each time I did, she was right there, gently correcting me, showing me the right way to do things. She never made me feel bad about it, and that made all the difference. She had this friendly, calm way about her that put me at ease, even when I felt a bit lost. And it turned out, I learned faster than I expected. By the end of that first day, though, I was completely exhausted. My brain felt like it had been working nonstop, trying to take in so many new things at once, from how to use the coffee machine, to keeping the counter clean, to dealing with customers. It was a lot. But despite the tiredness, I felt this quiet sense of happiness. I had a job, a real job, and that felt like a big deal to me. I kept thinking about how this was just the beginning, and there was still so much more to learn. My journey had only started, and this was just one of many new challenges waiting for me in England. The next day is Friday, and just like the day before, I head off to school. It's starting to feel a bit more routine, though everything is still pretty new to me. When I get to class, we start as usual with some exercises and a bit of conversation practice. Then, out of nowhere, one of the students asks a question that really catches my attention. He raises his hand and says, "Sometimes when I'm speaking, I'm not sure if I'm saying things correctly, like I don't know if my grammar is right. What should I do if I want to really learn grammar?" As soon as he says that, I find myself thinking, yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. It's such a simple but important question, and I'm relieved someone else is brave enough to ask it. I mean, grammar has always been one of those things that makes me second-guess everything I say in English. It's like, even when I'm trying to speak, there's this little voice in my head asking, is that right? Did you use the right tense? What if you just made a huge mistake and don't even know it? So, I'm sitting there, waiting eagerly for the teacher's response. The whole class seems curious too. Everyone is leaning in a little closer, waiting for advice that might finally give us some clarity. I knew this wasn't going to be an easy fix or something I'd figure out overnight, but I felt like I was about to get a little closer to understanding how to truly improve. This was just one small moment in class, but I could feel that it was going to be important for my journey in learning English. There were so many more questions I had, and this was just the start of figuring them out. Our teacher paused for a moment, looked around the room, and then smiled before answering. "Thank you for your question," she said, in a calm and thoughtful way, like she had been asked this before but still appreciated it every time. "You see," she continued, "there are actually two types of students when it comes to learning English." The whole class was listening closely now. "Some students," she explained, "study English because they want to be able to speak fluently, to have conversations, to feel confident using the language in everyday life. They want to communicate naturally, not just know the rules." Then, she went on, "there are other students who study English because they need to pass an exam. Maybe they need to get a certificate." It made me realize that maybe I'd been trying to do a bit of both without really knowing which approach worked best for me. I wasn't the only one thinking this either. I could see a few other students nodding their heads, probably having the same thoughts as me. It felt like the teacher had just laid out a simple but important truth about learning English, and I knew this was just one small part of the bigger journey. There were still so many lessons ahead, and I was only just starting to figure out what path I should be taking. The teacher continued, looking around the room to make sure everyone was still following along. "First," she said, "I want to talk about those of you who are learning English to speak it, to communicate in real life." I leaned forward a little, knowing this part was for me. "If this is your goal," she went on, "you don't need to spend too much time studying grammar. Think about it. When you learned your native language, you didn't sit down with grammar books, right? You just picked it up naturally, by hearing and using it. The same thing can happen with English." I nodded along as she spoke. It made sense. I had always felt a bit overwhelmed by all the grammar rules, but maybe I didn't need to stress about them so much. "One of the best ways to learn grammar naturally," she said, "is through reading. When you read books, you see good grammar in action, in the context of a whole sentence. You get used to how sentences are structured, how verbs and tenses are used, without even realizing it. So, I recommend reading as much as you can." That seemed like solid advice. I made a mental note to spend more time reading in English, but then she mentioned something new, something I hadn't heard of before. "Another great method is shadowing," she said, her voice full of enthusiasm. "It's simple but effective. When you shadow, you listen to someone speaking English, maybe a recording or a video, and you repeat what they say, word for word, copying their pronunciation, rhythm, and grammar. It's not about memorizing anything. You're just practicing speaking in a way that helps the grammar sink in naturally. You don't have to think about the rules at all." As she explained, I could feel the pressure lifting a little. This sounded like a more relaxed way to learn, a way that would help me improve without the constant worry of whether I was getting the grammar right. But I knew this was just one part of the journey. There was still so much more to learn, and this was only the beginning of figuring out how I was going to improve my English. The teacher paused for a moment before continuing, making sure we were all still paying attention. "Now, if you're someone who needs English mainly for speaking, but you also want to study a bit of grammar," she said, "I've got a great resource for you." I leaned in, curious to hear what she would suggest. There's a website called www.grammarinlevels.com, she explained. It's really helpful because it breaks grammar down by levels. So, whether you're just starting or already a bit more advanced, it shows you which grammar rules are important for your current level. As she said this, I could feel a bit of relief. I had been struggling to figure out which grammar rules I actually needed to focus on, and which ones I could worry about later. You don't have to spend hours studying every single grammar rule, she added with a smile. This site focuses on what's most useful for speaking. It keeps things simple and shows you the essentials. I made a mental note to check out the website later. It sounded like exactly what I needed, something that wouldn't overwhelm me but would give me the basics I could use when speaking. It felt like a small step in the right direction, one that might make the whole grammar thing a little less stressful. But I knew that this was only one part of the puzzle. There were still so many other things I had to learn and practice on this journey, and this was just another piece to help me along the way. The teacher shifted her focus, scanning the room as if trying to identify the students who might fit into the next category she was about to talk about. "Now," she began, "let's talk about the second group of students, those who are studying English specifically to pass an exam." I noticed a few students sit up straighter, paying close attention, clearly realizing this was the part for them. "If you find yourself in this group," she continued, "your approach to learning will need to be different. It's not just about practicing how to speak or understanding casual conversation. Your goal is to pass an exam, and that means you need to study with that specific purpose in mind." I wasn't exactly in this group, but I listened carefully anyway, knowing that exams could be in my future too. The way she spoke made it seem like there was a clear, more focused path for these students. "The first thing I recommend," she said, "is to make your study plan all about that exam. It might be tempting to try and learn everything at once: grammar, vocabulary, speaking, and writing. But what will really help you is honing in on the specific skills the exam will test you on. If possible, get hold of past versions of the exam. Most exams have them available somewhere, and they are an incredibly useful tool. When you study with past exams, you get a feel for the type of questions that will be asked, the format of the test, and what they are expecting you to know. This way, you're not just learning English broadly, but learning how to succeed on that particular exam." I could see how helpful this advice would be for someone who had to focus solely on passing a test. Exams have their own structure, and she made it clear that understanding that structure was just as important as knowing the material. "It's not about memorizing endless grammar rules or trying to speak perfectly," she explained, "but rather about understanding the specific requirements of the test and training yourself to meet those expectations. The more familiar you are with the exam itself, the more confident you'll feel when you sit down to take it." She made it sound so logical and straightforward. Of course, if your goal was to pass a test, it made sense to study past versions and familiarize yourself with the pattern. It wasn't just about learning the language anymore. It was about mastering the test. Even though I wasn't preparing for an exam right now, I could see the value in what she was saying. Everyone's journey with English was different, and for some, this exam-focused method was the key to success. I kept thinking about how every student's path in learning English seemed so unique. Some were here to speak more fluently, others to pass exams, and then there were people like me just trying to navigate this new world and find the best way forward. I knew I had a long road ahead, and this was just one more piece of advice that I would carry with me along the way. There was still so much more to discover, and I couldn't wait to see what was next. Of course, your exam might be a little different from the past versions you study, but generally the structure is usually the same or very similar, the teacher continued, her voice steady and reassuring. I could see some students nodding, and it made me feel like we were all on the same page. From my point of view, these past versions of the exam are really good training materials. They help you understand what to expect and what kind of questions you might face. Plus, they give you a chance to practice under conditions that are similar to the real exam. This can really boost your confidence. She paused for a moment, looking at each of us, making sure we were all following along. Now, after you've practiced with these materials, I recommend that you only go to take the exam when your results show that you're ready. If you're consistently doing well with the practice tests, that's a sign you're prepared. It's like building a solid foundation before you construct a house. You want to make sure everything is strong and stable before you go for the final exam. I could almost picture what she was saying. If I rushed in without being ready, it could all come crashing down. The classroom was quiet, and I could feel everyone absorbing her advice. "Did I answer your question?" she asked, looking around to see if anyone had more thoughts to share. I realized how much I appreciated her guidance. It wasn't just about learning English. It was about understanding how to prepare for the challenges that lay ahead. Each piece of advice felt like a stepping stone, guiding us through this journey. As I sat there, I thought about my own path. I wasn't focused on an exam just yet, but I knew that one day I might be. I wondered if I would remember all these tips when that time came. It was comforting to know that even though I was still figuring things out, there were clear steps I could take to prepare myself for the future. I was beginning to see that learning English wasn't just about studying. It was also about building confidence and knowing how to approach each challenge. There were still many lessons to learn and experiences to have, and I was eager to see where this journey would take me next. "Yes, thank you," the student replied, a smile spreading across his face. It was clear that he felt relieved. I couldn't help but feel happy for him. This was good news for all of us, really. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about my own experience. I've never been a fan of studying grammar. In fact, the idea of it always felt a bit heavy and dull to me. I was here to learn English so I could speak it confidently, not just to pass some exam that wasn't even on my radar. The thought of diving deep into grammar rules made me feel uneasy. But now I felt a bit lighter knowing that wasn't necessary for everyone. I loved the idea of learning through reading instead. Books were my escape, my adventure, and they could also teach me the grammar I needed without the boring drills. I imagined curling up with a good novel, losing myself in the story, and picking up the language naturally along the way. It felt so much better than memorizing lists of rules. After the lesson wrapped up, I decided to check out the website that the teacher mentioned earlier, www.grammarinlevels.com. I was curious to see if it lived up to the hype. When I got there, I was pleasantly surprised. The website looked really nice and organized. It had clear sections, and I could see that they offered grammar rules with examples tailored for each level. That was exactly what I needed. The site was divided into 3 levels based on vocabulary: 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 words. I quickly realized I could start at the 1,000 word section, where everything felt comfortable and manageable. The examples were straightforward, making it easy to understand how to use the grammar in context. I spent some time exploring, feeling more excited with each click. This was exactly what I had been looking for, a way to learn grammar naturally, without feeling overwhelmed. I could learn at my own pace, and that felt empowering. I kept thinking about how this journey was unfolding for me. Each new tool, like this website, was a little treasure that could help me along the way. I was eager to dive into reading more, exploring the website further, and of course, continuing to improve my speaking skills. There was still so much to discover, and I was ready for it all. In the afternoon, I head to work, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. It's my second day, and as I walk through the door of the cafe, I can already feel a bit more confident. I'm getting the hang of things, which surprises me. The tasks I have to do are starting to feel familiar. I remember the first day when everything was new and a little overwhelming, but today I can do many things on my own. I arrange the tables, prepare some drinks, and even help clean up. Each little task feels like a small victory. My boss is around, and she's still very helpful. Whenever I have a question or get stuck, she's right there, ready to guide me. I appreciate that a lot. It's nice to know I'm not alone in this. I watch her as she moves around the cafe, handling everything with ease. She has this way of making it all look so simple, and I admire her for that. She takes the time to show me the right way to do things, and I can tell she wants me to succeed. What I love the most is that I get to practice my English while I'm working. When customers come in, I have the chance to speak with them. At first, I was a bit shy, worried I might say something wrong, but as I talk to them, I realize it's not so scary. Most customers are friendly, and they appreciate my efforts to speak English. I ask them what they want, recommend drinks, and even chat a little about the weather or the cafe's specials. Each conversation helps me learn new words and phrases, and I feel a sense of accomplishment with each interaction. I notice that I am starting to think in English more, which feels amazing. It's like a switch is flipping inside my brain, and suddenly, English is becoming part of my daily life. I can see how these small moments of speaking with customers are building my confidence. They are not just customers, they are my practice partners. Each time someone smiles back at me or thanks me for my help, it gives me a little boost of confidence. I realize that work is not just a job, it's a place where I can learn and grow. There's still so much more to discover, and I'm excited about what the next days will bring.